Going live.
Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome to my shop. We are live with another video on the joinery window. We're going to be diving into this a bit. Tonight we're going to be doing the mitered half blind joint, a very traditional one for a lot of frames. But we've got a bit of news. If you're new here, we use the first 5 minutes or so of the video to come up the events coming up and past. So this last weekend we were at the MWTCA National Meet in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I know a lot of people are going to be asking, what did you buy? I bought a few odds and ends, things that I want to make for videos, like this wooden Yankee bit. And I think that I'm going to actually duplicate this at some point. I really like how this came out, and I want to try something similar to that. I also bought a saw setting tool. This one's actually from Distin, and so I'm going to have a video coming up on different types of sets. I bought a wooden brace. This one's missing a few pieces, and I thought this would be a good opportunity to try making one. I'm going to think about taking it apart and making a new body and replacing a couple of pieces. I bought this in a box lot. It's actually a really nice what's the profile finder, and so it's kind of a cool one. Bought a set of shears. I want to show a different video on sharpening scissors. That also came in the box lot. Then I got a 76. It's like the 45, excuse me, a 46, not a 76. It's like the 45, except for it has an angled iron. So the iron doesn't go straight across, it skews at an angle. So it has a few other interesting things like that, so I'm going to have a video coming up on that. Then this one's kind of weird. This is a router plane, but this one's made of aluminum, and you can see it's all scratched up in here. Some farmer said, hey Bob, can I borrow your router plane for a weekend? And he took it apart and cast it, and you can see in this casting there's scratch marks where he scratched out the Stanley logo that was cast into the side, and he cast his own. So it's actually a fairly common thing to have makers, farmers out there just cast their own. And then it's at an auction, and I bought this. This is a Stanley 71 router plane in the box with all the original packaging, mint, brand new condition, all the irons, all the pieces, even the tag that originally came on it and the literature underneath. Yeah, I'll let you guess how much I paid for it. You're probably wrong. But I want to ask you guys, because when I bought mine, I bought a Stanley 71. Oops, let me put this back in here. I bought mine 7 years ago, and mine came in the box. It's not quite as good. This box isn't quite as good of a shape, but it's the one I've been using for about 7 years now with all the pieces and still great shape. So I have 2 of these, and I'm trying to think, I don't need 2 of them. I should sell one of them. So I think I'm going to put one of them up on Can I Have It this weekend, starting bid of $1, free shipping anywhere. But the question is, which one should I sell? The new, to me, absolute mint condition, crispy box, really nice. Or should I sell the one I've been using for 7 years? The box isn't quite as perfect or clean and has a few issues, but it's the one that I've been using for 7 years. So let me know your thoughts. So I'll be selling one of them this week on Can I Have It? Stay tuned. So that's the fun I had at the MWTCA event, and it was just that's the bare minimum. So other events coming up. The next one I'll be at is in July, on July 16th, Washington, D.C. That's another MWTCA local event. Then July 29th in Orlando, Florida, actually in Kissimmee, Florida. That will be July 29th. That one's another MWTCA event. Then there's the Garfield Farms in LaFox, Illinois. That is on August 6th. That one, you have to be a member if you want to be there before 9 o'clock. But after 9 o'clock, they open it up to the public because it is a farm museum. And so that one is kind of fun to go to, but that one's all outside, and it's one of my favorite really good deals. That is on August 6th. I'll have links to all of these down below. Then there's Handworks, September 1st through the 2nd. If you're going to be to any event and you want to travel for one, this is the one to travel to. It's 2 days of all hand tools, and it's not just tool sales. It is modern makers. It is demonstration. They have like 60-some people coming to demonstrate. Roy Underhill will be there. Every name in the business will be there. It's 2 days of an entire town dedicated to hand tools. So yes, Amana, Iowa, September 1st and 2nd. The next one is September 10th in Frankfort, Illinois, another MWTCA National. Then September 16th in Raleigh, North Carolina, another MWTCA. And then the second national of the year is September 28th through the 30th in Des Moines, Iowa. So stay tuned.
Okay.
We got a lot coming.
So since I'm already in the room, they all want to know how much you paid for it.
For the router plane? Yeah. So,
or do you not want to tell in case you did? They're all saying sell the old one.
Sell the one I've been using?
Yeah.
That's what I'm actually leaning towards. But yeah, it was in the auction, and it was one of the last tools to be sold, and everyone's looking at it and thinking, wow, that's going to go for a good bit. And bid started off at like $5, and it went up and up and up, and it got to about $80, and the bidding kind of stalled at $80, and then someone else bid, and it went up to $100. And I'm like, it's a brand new crispy router for $100? So I put my hand up at 110, and no one else bid. So I bought it. And for some reason at auctions, my hands tend to be a little lighter than they should be. I haven't figured that one out.
That's because you had an 11-year-old who was very excited.
Yeah. My son bought a set of carving chisels, so we might be doing a video with him here soon. So, yeah, all of that coming out. Yeah, let's dive into joinery. So the joinery window, this is, every one of these joints has a different, every one of these corners has a different joint. So there are 9 different joints, 6 different pieces. In the past we did the simple half lap, and then we did the bridle joint. And so tonight we are actually doing the mitered bridle joint. So from this side it looks like a bridle joint, but from this side it looks like a miter, and from all other sides it looks like a miter. This is a fairly common one for picture frames or any stretched frame, because it gives you dimensional strength, whereas a miter joint may actually slip. This won't slip in any direction other than the one it comes apart in. And so it is a very strong joint that gives you a lot of stability, and it's relatively easy. So if we made the bridle joint last week, the mitered bridle is basically the same thing with a few modifications.
Last week?
Yeah, it's been a little while since we've been back. We've been gone. I've been out of the shop for the last 2 weeks, so it's been fun. So we've got these ones here, and we are going to be doing this between sticks 2 and 3. So the half lap is on 1 and 2. The bridle joint is between 3 and 4. And then I'm going to take these apart, move these aside, and we're going to put these in. Now, before we go any farther, I'm actually going to mark these out. Grab a pin here, and I want this to roughly, I'm going to put it away from this on the waist side here. So I'm going to be basically putting my marks in there so I know they go together this way. They don't go together that way. I'm going to need to put another mark in here. So this is getting removed, and this is getting removed. And that way you can't see, they can't go together that way. They can't go together that way. They can only go together that way. Now I'm going to be showing it 2 different ways so that you can duplicate it if you have the tools, because one of the easiest ways to do it is with a miter square. And I'm going to show how to do it with and without it. So on one of these, so let's see, how did I do it in the last one? Let me just make sure they actually match the past one. That is this one, and that was that one. So I want to make this one mitered. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to set this on here, and I'm going to bring this down, and oh, I didn't even pull my knife out yet. There we go. I'm going to put my knife right on this corner. Let me zoom in a little bit more here. There we go. I'm going to put my knife right on that corner. I'm going to slide the square, and I'm going to slide it up against this, and then make a knife here. Light, medium, and then crank it in. And that line is where I want to actually cut this off. Now I want to transfer this all the way around, and so what I could do is put in this side, and then come over here and do the same thing on this side. I'll put it right into that corner, slide the square up against it, and then light, medium, hard. And then I'm going to grab my little square, flip it up on edge, and I want to make sure that these lines actually attach. So I'm going to come over here, I'll put my knife right into that line here, slide up against, and mark across the top. And sure shooting, those lines touch here, and I wrap it around, and those lines touch on this corner right on. So on this one, we just cut it straight off. Now I could put it on the shooting board and shoot it right up to that line, or I could cut a little ways away from the line and then shoot it off, or I could cut right on the line. That's usually what I prefer to do. I actually like to set it up in my end device. I could put it in a bench hook, and I'm going to show that with the other one. But usually I like to hang it off the bench and do it like this. I'm a little weird, and that's okay. I'm going to use a sash saw. This has cross-cut teeth. Now because I'm going at 45 degrees, I could go cross-cut, or I could go rip cut, or I could get a hybrid cut. So in this one, you get a saw. I'm going to start off in here. I'm going to grab the back side of the board just like a straight cut, and I'm going to pinch it, and I'm going to be lifting all the weight off. I want the weight to all be back on this back horn. So I'm lifting all the weight off of the wood. I'm just letting it scratch across the top. I'm not letting it bite in yet. Letting it establish. Once I have this side down, I'm going to let it draw down across and follow that line.
So you're going to cut the whole thing off?
What's that?
You're cutting the whole thing?
On this one, yeah.
Okay.
Now that I'm established all the way across, I'm going to be looking at the line on this side. I want to follow down. And now I'm going kitty corner all the way across. I could just cut straight down, or I could flip it around and go the other side. I'm actually just going to cut straight down this side, and I'm just going to think about leaning the saw away from it because I can come back and clean it up. And just thinking about it moves it that hair away. Just like that. And then we see how well we did. In this case, pretty good. We are a hair away from the tip. Here, focus, there we go. So you can see over on this side, I've got a bit showing, and I'm right on the line here. So now we need to trim that back, and that is where the shooting board comes out. The shooting board is one of my, honestly, I didn't like it a lot at the beginning until I got a good shooting board and a good shooting plane. Once you have ones that really perform well, everything else clicks. And I've got like 4 or 5 videos on making a shooting board, and I never really used them that much until I made this one, and I got an actual shooting board plane. So for this, I need to actually set it up to 45 degrees, and I wanted to do this on the camera so you can see what all goes into it, because on this one it's a bit of a fun. Oop, turned up. There we go. And when people get this one, they think, oh, I can just set it to the angle and go at it. It actually takes a little bit of work. I have to take the fence off. Now it is set up so I can slide it back a little ways. I'm going to move it until it just touches the plane, and then lock it back down. Oop, I got a rubbing a nut on the back. So let me tighten these down a little bit more first. Oh, first, it helps if I set it at 45 degrees.
I was going to ask, but...
So I've got little hash marks back here that get me really, really close. So I can set that on there, and then I'm going to move it up until it just touches the bed of the plane. And now I can lock these down in, check that it's actually just touching it, just like that. And so now I can put this in here, slide up against. Whoop, here, you lock this down in with the vise. And just going until I get right up to that line. And so we can actually test this and see. Where's my miter screw? Oh, I put it away. We can see how close are we. And that is Wow, most of the time I need a little bit of adjustment. That one is dead on. That's happy. From both sides. That's not right. It can't be that accurate. It's never that accurate right off. Let me just set it this way. Okay, yeah, there's the problem. There's always something. I'm out of square this way ever so slightly. So that means that my plane is tilting. Oh, sure enough, I've got some dust in the track over here that's causing the plane to lean a little bit. So I'm just going to think about that and kind of twist it back as I push. Just put a little bit of back pressure on it. It should only take one shaving. Yeah, one more shaving. There we go. There we go. That's what I want that way. And that's what I want that way. 45 degrees and 90 degrees. So that is one half of it. Where did my other board go? There we are. And this one is going to go into this way. Now on this one, I don't want to cut it at miter like this. I want to cut a tenon, but the tenon is only going to be in the mitered section. Whereas this one, I'm only going to have a mortise on what is left over from the mitered section. So I can put the shooting board away. I don't need to shoot the other one. And now, we're going to treat this exactly like we treated the bridle joint, except for it's at an angle. And so I've got my marking gauge still set up with my pins from the bridle joint. There's the bridle joint. So in this case, I've got the marking gauge pins set up to reference the taped side. And these are the width apart that I want my mortise to be, as well as the width that I want my tenon to be, referenced off the tape. Now my mortise and tenon are not centered in the board. They're actually ever so slightly off. And I want to show that because there's absolutely no reason for these to be in the center other than aesthetics. As long as you're always referencing off the same side of the board, in this case the side I have taped, then they'll all be in the same direction because they were all moved from the same face. That's why you always want to be referencing your reference face. Now I got to grab, I need this one and I need this one. Flip this back around. Any questions?
Not necessarily related to the project.
Here, let me do this first. Oh, I gotta show this one first. I'm a little bit scatterbrained today, if you haven't noticed, because I've been gone for 2 weeks. And I got back into this, and I was like, oh, I've got live to do. How did I do that again? I forgot how to do this. What was I just gonna do? Oh, cutting the miter on this. So on this one, I used the miter square to mark the miter. If you don't have one of these, you don't need one. All you need is the block you're intersecting with and a ruler. So I'm going to show you how to do that on the other one, because we have to draw the line on this second one. And for that, I'm going to take the other board, set it on here, and then I want to make sure that it's at 90 degrees. So I'm going to slide this up on here. Let me make sure. So I want to go to this side here. So I'm going to slide this up on here, and I'm going to flush it up with the back side here. Make sure it's at 90 degrees. Take the square away. I'm going to bring in my knife. I'm just going to make a little tick mark right here. That tick mark is where it needs to intersect. So that needs to go from this tick mark to this corner. And the nice thing about doing it this way is you can actually do it with pieces that aren't the same thickness. Now in this case, these are the same dimension this way. But if this one was 3 inches and this one was 6 inches and you need to make a line that wasn't 45, you can make it match the other one, and I don't care what the angle is, you're just playing connect the dots. So in this case, I'm going to take my ruler, set it up over on top of this one. I'm going to put my knife into that tick mark we just created. Here, let me bring this over here so you can actually see. Put my knife into that tick mark, put the ruler against that, and then I'm going to spin the other end of the ruler back here until I line up with the corner. And then I'm going to go light, medium, hard. And there's that side line. Then to transfer it around, I'll grab this, put the knife into that same tick mark, slide it over, light, medium, hard, and then Do the same thing on this side. Put it up against the knife, line it up with the corner right there, and then go light. Oop, I just bumped a little bit. Let me go back. Light, medium, hard. And there I've got my marks put all the way around. Now we need to create our mortise thicknesses, our cheek lines. So I'm going to put that into the vise. Slide this back over here. And I'm going to grab my marking gauge. And with the marking gauge, now I only need it on the top and on this side because my mortise line comes right down here. So I don't need to mark on this side with a bit of the point. And I want to make sure I'm referencing the side with the tape. So I'm going to put it on here. I'm going to go across the top. And I'm going to go down the face. I'm just going to go down to that line we just drew. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other board. But on this one, I'm going to do it on the angled face and then down here. But I need to know how far down to go. So I could put this on here and put the square on there. But on this one, I already cut a mitered angle on there. So I'm just going to grab my knife at that line, slide over to there, and I'm going to put a tick mark right here where it intersects. Flip it up because I only need the mark on the back side of the board. Put my knife in the tick mark, slide up against. I'm just putting a line in the middle here because in this one, we're only taking out the mortise. So here, I'll show you what I'm talking about. This one, there's just a line in the middle because we're going to be making that on here and we're cutting the middle of this out. We're still leaving this piece of wood and this piece of wood. So, there you go. Put this in here. Tape is on this side, so the fence goes on this side. We're going to come down the angled face. And then I'm going to come down, actually I'm going to come up. I'm going to start at that line we just drew and come up the face. Just like that. So we've got all of our layout done. Now we're going to treat this just like a mortise and a bridle joint. So I'm going to grab my tenon saw, which last time I said, hey, I'm going to sharpen this before the next time. And then I'm gone for 2 weeks. So it's just as dull as last time, which means I've got to be careful. It was wanting to wander a little bit because when they get dull, the dust tends to pack up around. They don't clear up quite as well. So make sure we're in focus here. Flip over to 3. And I'm going to start up here, grab the board, pinch it so it can slide against the thumbnail. And I'm just going to start at this point. Again, I'm lifting the weight off of the saw so that I'm not putting anything into the work. I'm just letting the saw do it. And I'm going to come right on down this face. Do the second thing on the other side. Let too much of the weight of the saw get in it, it bites. Now, we're going to turn it around, do the same thing from this side, except we have the kerfs on the other side to control it, and just focus on this line. I'm getting off a little bit, so I'm going to back up, and I'm going to twist the saw, not at the bottom of the kerf, but back a little ways, and I'm going to use the side of the teeth to scratch it back into place, get back on line all the way down to depth. There we go, and now I can keep going. Down to depth there. I'm going to flatten out the saw. Down to depth, down to depth. Same thing on this side. Stop at the angle, bring it back, flatten it out. And there we go. We are down to depth on that one. Second verse, same as the first, ought to get better, but it's not. I'm going to do the exact same thing on this one, except for on this one, rather than stopping flat, we're going to stop at an angle. So I want to make sure it's up high enough that the back of my saw isn't going to be running into the vise.
Okay, so is that your tenon side or your mortise side?
This will be the tenon side.
Okay.
Yes. So this one will be removing the waste in between the lines. So I'm making sure my saw is on the inside of the line. This one I'm making sure the saw is on the outsides of the line. So normally I'm going to start on the back one here, but I don't want to do that because I don't want to cut down the back. So I'm actually going to start it on the front. I could turn it around and then do it one way and then the other. Making sure I'm staying on the outside of the line for this one. To the line there. To the line there. Now we play connect the dots. One more, right there. And one more time. Oop, off the line a little bit, so I'm going to back it up. Twist the saw a little bit and use the side of the teeth to scratch it in. Bring myself right back onto that line. Now I'm back on here. Follow along the top. Make sure my kerf is good there. If you find yourself rushing and really pushing on the saw and putting a lot of force into it, that's where things go wrong. That's when the saw wants to clog up and move off. And yeah, I am having fun. It's kind of feeling like a Roy Underhill moment. I'm sweating and out of breath and I'm enjoying it. Thankfully there's no blood on the tools yet. That will probably come. Yeah, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to cut the cheeks on this one. So we cut down, no, we cut the cheeks. We're going to cut the shoulders on them. So I'm going to do basically the same thing I just did before. Again, I'm going to be using a sash saw, or actually in this case I'm going to use my carcass saw. It's a little bit thinner. This one's a little bit sharper at the moment. And I don't need to cut all the way through. And I really like my carcass saw. A carcass saw is just a smaller sash saw. Still cross-cut teeth. Leaving the weight off of the saw. There we go. We're established all the way across. And I don't need to cut down very far. I'm just going to cut down to the depth at the back here. And then I'm going to tip it forward and cut down to the depth at the front. Oop, that's all we need right there. Now before I go any farther, I'm going to check this and make sure we're flat. I want to bring in a square or a side of a chisel, and I want to see if it rocks at all. And in this case, because my other saw was having problems, I can tell that this is going to have a high spot right here. So before I go anywhere, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to show a couple different ways of doing that. I could bring in a side rabbeting plane. This one's really easy because I can just do that middle section back in there. Oop. I'm taking a really heavy shaving. Let's back that off. Something a little lighter. There we go. I just want to take it off in the middle there. We can bring this back in. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Okay, now it's stable. It's not rocking at all. It's just locked on there. That's pretty good. I'm right on that line. Yep, so that should be good. Then I also want to check, yeah, I do want to do a chisel. That shoulder is just a little bit dirty. So I'm just going to do a little cleanup in here. And if anything, come through and undercut it a little bit. It is better to undercut than to have something pushing up and causing a gap. That should be good. We're going to flip it over. Do the same thing on the other side. Now normally I would move it to the other end of the bench so it would hang off the other way. In this case, I'm actually going to move the camera around, and I'm going to twist around it so you guys can see a little bit better what's going on. So make sure that's in focus. 3, am I in focus? No, I'm on focus on the dust. I don't want to be focused on the dust. Don't look at my floor. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Same thing, starting on the back side, pinching the board, letting it slide on the thumbnail. Establish it. bring it back along the face. I have to take a slightly shorter stroke so I don't run into the bench. And then I'm going to bring it down to depth on this side. Oh, so close. There we go. Now in this one, I know I'm off the line that way. And it should be bowing the other direction, but it's not. I still have a belly in the middle of this one too. Now I can't plane this way because I'm planing against the grain. So in that case, I have to flip it around and put it on the other end of the bench. So there we go. Now the other way I could do it is I could just grab a chisel rather than using a block plane. Is I can start. Actually, let me show this a little bit closer. You can't see it from there. Let's try this. There we go. So on this one, what I can do is just start in here. I'm not going to start out the edge. I'm going to start in the middle of the board, and I'm going to just plane it back. And just getting rid of that hump. If there's a little bit of a junk in the middle, that's not a problem as long as it's not high in the middle. If it's a little bit low, that's okay. Make sure it's stable. That looks about right. Then I need to remove that material in between. So I'll come in with the chisel. Need to get myself out of the way. It's hard to do this with the camera in here. And again, I'm just making sure I get rid of everything in that corner. Now, if I really wanted to check things, I could bring in my miter square, and I can set it up on here in the right direction, and make sure that everything that way is copacetic. Actually, you're off a little bit. No, it's not. Just my eye. Let's check this way. Hey, pretty, look at that. I like them when they actually work. So, there is the tenon. Now let's do the mortar side. And this one is actually a lot easier. Switch back to this camera. And I am sweating. Ah, it's fantastic. And if you know anything about me, I sweat while sitting down on a 50-degree day. Ah, life is good. Especially when you're married to that girl.
I was just thinking, I have to
What's that?
cuddle with the sweaty.
Yes. Guess who has to go get in bed with this thing? Hold fast. And then I've got.
What did you put on your holdfast?
This is a cap by. I can't remember. I just did a video on holdfast a couple weeks ago. So this is a Gramercy holdfast, and it's a cap that is sewn and slides over. Really, really cool. But yeah, go check out the video I just did on it because it's.
Clearly, I didn't.
I was kind of
video.
like, yeah, it's a silly little thing. I actually like it. So, it's one of those things that kind of surprised me. They sent it to me, and I was like, okay, someday I might do a video on it, and I'll play with it, or I'll see, silly, dumb inventions, and that's what I actually like. Never know what you're gonna like until you try it. Okay, here we go. So I have this at an angle here. I'm going to come in with a 1/4-inch chisel. I'm not going to start right on the edge. I'm going to come out a little ways. And I'm just going to tap down a bit, come in this way, and pop out those chunks. Then tap down, and pop out those chunks. I love this part because you're popping these large pieces out very, very quickly, very easily, and
which camera
it's very enjoyable.
do you want to be on the big one?
I should be on the little one, but I'm probably not.
No, you're not.
Thank you. There we go. Chop in, pare out. And I'm not going to go all the way down because I want to leave a little bit of space. Probably hit that one a little bit too deep. That and this grain is curly, so it is fun to work with. Fun by my terms. Not fun by my wife's terms. Her idea of fun is sitting on a beach. My idea of fun is a tightly packed schedule of getting everything done.
The only time James wakes up early is on vacation.
It's the best time to wake up early. So now we got most of the way down. I'm going to come back halfway to the line. I'm going to set the chisel end eyeball vertical. Run down. And now I'm going to put it right into that line. Right there. Just eyeballing vertical. Then release the hold fast, flip it over, and do the same thing from the other side, but I only have a little ways to go on this one. So in this one, I'm going to start just a hair away from that line, and I know I'm probably going to break it off. That's perfectly fine. And then I'm going to go back halfway to that line. And now I'm going to go right into that line. Eyeball vertical or a little bit undercut. Actually, I'm going to do a little bit undercut. Why? Because why not? And I can see a little bit of shmoo in there I have to clean out. Now, let's loosen this up and see what we got in here. Now what you can use is the side of a chisel. Put it in here and touch this side and then lower it down. It should be able to touch both sides at once. Or I could bring in a square and do the same thing with that. And it should be able to touch both sides. But in this one, I've got some shmoo in there that needs to clean out. And to do that, I'm going to grab a little larger chisel, a 3/4 inch. Just kind of bowing out in the middle here. I'm going to use the stabbing motion. Whoop.
If you're curious on your time, it's 8:36.
Oh, we're doing good. Now, to really detail it in, I keep forgetting how short that Gramercy is. I'm actually going to grab a file. Just a second, I'm off camera.
Bile?
I got to find the right. Actually, I'm going to grab
Oh,
a
file. I was like,
tooth
bile
file.
is a very different thing.
Bile is a very different thing.
I was like, wait.
Take it up, put it in the vise. And I'm going to use the file to just sneak up. Well, actually, before we do anything more, let's see if an absolute miracle has occurred. And see. Yeah, they're wedging up already. Mm-hmm. So it's a bit tight on the inside. And generally, I prefer to make the mortise fit the tenon if I know my tenon is correct, because it's easy to measure the tenon and know that it is flat. I would rather come through and adjust the mortise because it's relatively easy to do with a file. Set it in here. And yeah, I can see I'm off the line a good bit here. So I could come in with a chisel, and it's a little bit more than I would take off of the file. And get rid of most of it that way. Bring in this. Nice clean surface. See how that does. Well, that's really close.
Ken and I are thinking the same
really close.
thing.
What's that?
That it's a float, not a file.
No, this is a curved tooth file, not a float, which is very confusing because a float usually has these large teeth that go all the way across, but a file is hardened, and a float generally is not hardened, at least not as this hard. This is designed as hard enough to work on metal. And also, if it's curved, it's not a float. So, okay. Anytime I talk about names, there are industries that will call things differently, and there are different manufacturers that will call things differently. Like the plate on a saw, a panel saw. I have several books from Diston where they label it plate. And it was my understanding, and from everything I had seen, it is labeled plate. So I was talking to a guy this week, and he said, no, Diston always called it a blade. And I'm like, they never called it a blade. I look at all my documents, and they're all plate. And he looks at all of his documents, and they're all blade. So Diston even called it different things. In the automotive world, they would have called it a lead float. However, in the woodworking world, we call it a curved tooth file. And there's a big gray area there. You can have whatever you want. But yeah, Nerex calls it a curved tooth file. And they're the only one I know of that still makes them for woodworking. And so I'll stick with Nerex on that one. But then also, Veritas makes a rip cut carcass saw, which that gets a lot of saw people really crazy because a carcass saw by definition is a crosscut saw. And so names are always fun. They're a great way to have good arguments, though. Probably took off a little bit too much there. Got a little zealous in enjoying it. Actually, no, that's pretty good. That's pretty good indeed. I got a little bit of a gap there. So now we play the game of why is there a gap? What are we running into? And it's on here. And here I was saying, and indeed, this is flat, but I'm noticing, here, let me see if you guys can see this. There's a dark smudge here. It's not really dark, it's just bruised, where the wood here is polished and shiny. That tells me it's really, really tight right here. And the same thing on the other side. It's really, really tight right here. And if I look at it here, I can still see the line. So I didn't go quite down deep enough. Now it's flat from here to here, but it is a solid angle. So it's smooth all the way across, but this side needs to come down a little bit more. So let's put that in here. And normally I don't like working on the tenon. I find it to be a little more difficult. Now I could bring in the router plane and do that, but I don't like working on router planes on tenons. Here, I'm running into a handle. Move this over here. There we go. Let's see what that did. And this is one of those joints where you can fiddle on it for a while because you can get it dead accurate or you can get it really close. And did I get it dead accurate? I got it really, really close. So here I've got, you probably can see this, very, very nice and tight here, but then it comes to a slight gap up here, like a 64th of an inch. And on the back side here though, it's an even gap all the way along. And so that lets me know this side is good, and this side is good down, this side is good up here, but it's not good down here. So I don't want to touch the mortise side. I want to touch the tenon side, but just take off a little bit right here on this one cheek, shoulder. So let's put this back down here, raise it up a little more. And I'm going to take the file, I'm going to tip it down just a little bit. Let's see what that did. Diagnosis. And we're going for perfect here. There is no such thing as perfect, but we're going to get as close as we can to it. Let's see what does it look like on this side. Oh, that's close. Okay, yep. So on this case, I have a little bit of a gap here and a little bit of a gap up here. And it looks from this point like there's a little bit of a gap here in the middle. But if you look down in there, the middle is bowed out. So when I filed it, my file hit flat here and it hit flat up here, but in the middle I had tipped it a little bit. So I got to take off a little bit more in the middle here. And because it's just so little, I don't want to do that with a file. I'm going to come in with the chisel, get that handle out of the way. Handle in the way again. Dust in the wind. I'm just going to come in with this, and I'm going to trim out that middle section. And in most joints, what I just showed you is more than good enough. You clamp that down, you put some glue on it, you'd never see it. It was perfect. But I want to go a little bit tighter. And I could work at this all day long. There. That's looking about right. Yeah, that's nice. Here we go. That's what I want. Now, yeah, there's a tiny bit of gap there, but that would squeeze out, and I can tell when I push it together, it disappears. So that's where I want it to be. That is nice. Nice tight there. Nice tight back and, oop, take it off. Tight back on the inside there. There we go. Mitered bridle joint. Happy day. So we've got mitered bridle joint, the half flap, miter joint, there we are, bridle joint, and the half flap here. So next time we are doing I think we're going on to the tenon next. The tenon, so we're going to have one of these boards dead ending into the other one. So 3 joints down, 6 to go, and I like doing this. So if you'd like to follow along, I do have a SketchUp file. I'm trying to get plans made with measured drawings, but right now it's just a SketchUp file. It's a free download on my website. There's a link to it down below. So if you want to follow along and build with me, then have fun with that. What questions we got? We'll jump into
we have
about 10 minutes of Q&A.
Some that were with the project, and then I'll tell you when they're no longer about the project. Oh, excuse me. FundiMike asked, if you wanted to hide the tenon so that it fully looks like mitered joint but has a hidden bridle joint, what would be done differently?
Yeah, that would be a blind tenon joint. So in this case, what I would want, let me see, is I don't want to see it. Oop, go in. Why are you jamming all of a sudden? You don't want to see this here. You want it to look like this. So in that case, what we do is once we cut this, we're going to come in here with a saw, and we're going to cut down about a 1/2 inch here and leave that out. And so our tenon, let me draw it on here. So we would cut down here like this. And so we would cut cross grain here, and then we'd cut diagonally here. And we would remove this piece of wood. And then on this piece, this becomes the tricky part. We don't cut down to cut our cheeks. We don't cut all the way down here. We still draw the lines on this face, but we don't draw the lines on this face. And then we set it here, and we chisel down. So we chisel this way and pare out, chisel, pare out, chisel, pare out, chisel, pare out, and we pare out down to about a 1/2 inch from the bottom here. And you got to kind of eyeball it, but you'll leave the last 1/2 inch here, so that when they slide together, the 1/2 inch left over here goes over top of what was taken out here. I don't generally like to do that because it isn't that much more work, but it ends up giving you about half the strength of the miter. I know you're only losing, it looks like you're only losing that much, but that piece out there was providing the vast majority of the strength. The farther out on the joint it is, the more leverage it has. So there's places for it if you like the look of a miter. I like being able to show the joinery so you can see what it is, but different strokes for different folks and in different places. But maybe sometime I'll do a video on that one. What's next?
Ken Carlile asked earlier if that was a Lee Nielsen side rabbet.
Yes, side rabbet block plane. It's the, what is it? They call it the 106. What is the number on that one? 60.5. There it is. With the reed planes bearing adjuster, which I love that thing. And stay tuned. We're actually having one come for the Lee Nielsen 101 and 102. I think on Thursday they're going to get released. So, hey, more fun coming. What's next?
Caneycreek woodcarver asked, how wide of a kerf should a miter saw have?
A miter saw? Like a big circular saw with the chop, usually it's a little less than 1/8 of an inch, though you can get a thin blade that's like, what is it, 3/30 seconds, something like that. Yeah. Oh, unless you're talking like a miter box saw, in which case those are, what is it, 0.035? I think is the thickness of the plate. Kerf is just a hair more than that. So very thin. Unless you want to go Japanese, then you've got a whole nother ball of wax. What's next?
François Best asked, any tips for correcting a deviating saw kerf when cutting the cheeks? I had kerfs going too close to the line and ended up with a rough cheek / unsupported fibers trying to connect.
Yes. Cutting the cheeks, well, let me put it this way. If you're cutting a line through the thin portion of the board, just like I showed, you back up. You don't be at the bottom, because if you're trying to if you're at the bottom and you realize you're starting to go off course, if you try to correct it there, you're just going to get a saw that goes back and forth, and you're going to be going all over the place. You want to back up to where it is good, and then twist to the saw so you're using the side of the teeth to scratch the line back over, and with a light hand, not letting the weight of the saw, just lifting the weight of the saw and using it kind of like a file to scratch the line back to where it is until you get back down to the depth. And at that point, you're moved over a little bit. And that's the best way to do it. And that's why I cut right on the line. I mean, if anything, I'm thinking about leaning against it, so it's 1 or 2 shavings with a chisel back. But if anything, I try to hit right on the line. But most of the time, it's just back up and redo it. Now, the problem is if you're doing something thicker and you're doing a cheek cut, and you might be cutting through something that's 2, 3, 4, 6 inches wide, it becomes difficult to adjust that. In that case, until you get the skill to run it, just plan on staying as far away from it as you can and still chisel back. It's kind of one of those things that the only way you're going to get that skill is to do it. And you're going to mess up a lot, and you're going to do it over and over and over again until it just starts getting a little better and a little better. And one day you just realize, I haven't had a problem with that in the last few cuts. I wonder what happened to that. It's just one day it's actually working, and you never really noticed it. But the only way to get there is to practice it. And I can give you tips and tricks all the way up the wazoo, and they're not going to help you one bit until you actually jump in and do the work. So yeah, until the skill is there, stay a little ways away from the line and just plan on chiseling back and get good at adjusting that. This bit keeps stabbing me. Like, I've got 4 or 5 puncture wounds on my thumb from it. But yeah, don't worry about it. We all go through it. It's one of those things that it's just a skill to be learned, and every one of us have had that problem. So keep trying. What's next?
Well, Warren super chatted just for a mom joke. Joke, sorry. Okay, we're going to go a little sciencey here. You ready? Why, when the king farted, did nobody laugh?
What? Because
noble gases don't cause reactions.
I like that one. Here, we're on the drive home today, and it was quiet because they were all tired. They were been running. It was great. Suddenly, out of nowhere, JJ says, "Dad, why did the pirate put a pair of pants in his treasure?" What? Why? Well, he didn't want anyone to see his booty.
That was a better joke than mine.
Where did that one come from?
It's JJ. You never know.
What's next?
All right. I have 3 more questions. James Cary asked, how much did this... Okay, we're done with related to the project. How much did the Stanley number 77 dowel cutter sell for at the auction?
It sold in pieces. The dowel cutter by itself, I want to say it was $300, which is probably the cheapest I've ever seen one go. But it didn't have a box. It was just the piece. Everything was there except for the cutters. It didn't have any cutters. The cutters each sold for, I think it was 130 to 160 each, which is a little bit less than normal. Usually I'm seeing those going for 180 to 220, though sometimes a little more. I saw one once where it was the dowel maker in the original box and it had 4 cutters, and I think it sold for $2,500. Though they go for even higher than that on eBay. They're expensive. What's next?
Margaret Altvater asked, how do you touch up your planemaker float edges? Do you soak them in vinegar?
I don't. Well, floats. Floats, you can sharpen them. Here, let me grab these. They're soft enough you can hit them with a file. They're basically a wide saw. So you sharpen them just like you would sharpen a saw. They're basically a big rip saw, just very, very wide. So you take a triangular file and you sharpen them down. Vinegar soaking doesn't sharpen files or rasps, no matter what they say. It's one of the things you're going to see dozens of videos online. How to sharpen your files and rasps if you have this acid soak. And no, they don't sharpen it. They'll clean them. They'll make them nicer, but they don't sharpen them. They do actually round over the tip, but they'll clean them, but it doesn't sharpen, and it causes other problems if you're not careful with it. So usually I don't go that way. When files or hardened things get dull, you give them your local blacksmith, and he'll pound them into something else. They're not something you can actually sharpen. So, what's next?
Last question. David Walcott asks, best way to coffee stain wooden utensils?
I've never actually done coffee staining, so I'm sorry. I wouldn't be the person to ask for that. I would end up doing a lot of experimentation to play with different things with scraps and find out what way I like. Because usually that's when I haven't tried something and I want to experiment with it, I like to experiment. So I'll cut up a bunch of scraps, cut up several batches of coffee and try them in different ways, different strengths and different types and different amounts of times and different soaking. I might try vacuum. I might try with a rag. I might try fully dipped in different lengths of time and heat. And there's lots of things you could try and see which one you like. So experiment. It's a lot of fun. So I think that will do it for now. I'm not sure what, I think next week we're actually going to do the tenon. So stay tuned for that, and we'll let you know. I think I'll do it for now. Until next time, have a wonderful day.
Bye.